Fighting a boycott with a ban. Israel has passed a new law that bars entry to foreigners who have publicly supported the international boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. The BDS movement uses economic and political pressure to push for equal rights for Palestinians and to end the occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The new law bans entry and residency rights to anyone who knowingly issues a public call for boycotting Israel that has a reasonable possibility of leading to the imposition of a boycott in any area under its control. That includes settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are considered illegal under international law. BDS supporters have compared their movement to the non-violent campaigns against apartheid in South Africa and say they're fighting human rights abuses. But to the Israeli government, BDS is anti-Semitic and what it describes as a new front in the war against Israel. Israel's government has increasingly been on the offensive in its battle with the BDS movement. Last year, it committed around $25 million to challenge what it sees as a strategic threat. And the government's been further emboldened by US President Donald Trump. Last month in Washington, he gave a warm welcome to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's also appointed a pro-Israel hardliner as ambassador to the country, and Trump has speculated about moving the US embassy to Jerusalem. But critics to this new law say it discriminates the same way as Trump's travel ban on 6 mainly Muslim countries. They call it a worrying crackdown on free speech and non-violent dissent. There's also concern the law doesn't make the distinction between those who advocate boycotts of Israel and those who just support boycotting products made in the illegal settlements, which includes many Jewish Americans. It all adds up to a jarring redefinition of enemies that could see Israel isolating itself from its critics and supporters too. Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
To discuss this further, I'm joined now by Kwara Kekana from Johannesburg. She is the spokeswoman of the international boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in South Africa. And from the Israeli settlement Eli in the West Bank, anti-BDS activist Gedaliah Bloom. Thanks both so much for joining us. Gedaliah, let me start with you. You see this ban as acceptable and even necessary. Why?
To be honest with you, I think that whether you agree with the ban or not, that, people need to respect sovereign countries' right to admit or not to admit whom they please, and whichever levels whichever levels that they would want. For instance, I'll tell you what. I mean, we're not talking about this today, but Saudi Arabia has less women drivers than Israeli women who drive tanks. Yet if I was going to get a visa into Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't be able to walk down the street to protest for women's rights. And this is not breaking news right now. And so when I see that Israeli sovereignty is being challenged, I say, let's be consistent with the world. You may not agree with the ban, but it's certainly Israel's right to set its own standards about who comes in and who does not, especially when we're talking about foreign nationals, which have no rights as an Israeli citizen. We're not talking about Israeli citizens. It's not taking away the freedom of speech or the freedom to protest of Israeli citizens. We live in a free democracy. But on the other hand, we do have a right to deny anybody from coming into our country to be a subversive.
But Gedaliah, to draw a comparison between the democracy that Israel calls itself and the state that is Saudi Arabia, why would you want to make that comparison?
Why? Because I think that if you want to make a point, you have to go to the other extreme. And there's not much more extreme than you could get than the laws against women in Saudi Arabia.
So do you think Israel is at an extreme?
No, actually, what I'm trying to point out is the complete hypocrisy that this is even a subject. As we're learning about, these new fake news stories that are going on, that, if it's not this, it's going to be something else about Israel. And Israel is under a microscope, and that, anytime it may be perceived as being a misstep, that the whole world jumps on Israel and does not respect Israel's sovereignty.
Let me get to Kawado. Why do you think the BDS ban should persevere?
Firstly, I'm struggling to hear the gentleman on the other side. But I think insofar as this travel ban is concerned, I think as the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in South Africa, to us this is indicative of a regime in panic. And this will further isolate Israel. I mean, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement is a non-violent, rights-based approach movement. And you're seeing different governments in different parts of the world coming out and affirming people's right to do BDS. The Norwegian government, the Dutch pension fund, the Dutch government rather, the Swedish government as well, saying, you know what, people have a right to do BDS. People have a right to advocate for human rights. So when you as a regime want to then advocate or implement a travel ban, you're effectively saying to people, we want to ban human rights and human rights defenders, which is absolutely absurd. But what's also troubling, I think, for example, in the last couple of months in South Africa, those who form part of the World Council of Churches program from the Economical Accompaniment Program have been denied entry into Palestine. So Israel is an occupying power. At the same time, is denying people into Israel, but it's also denying people that want to do genuine work in Palestine as well. So again, I mean, this will further, as far as we're concerned, further isolate Israel. And we've seen what isolation campaigns can do. We've seen that in the South African case, for example. The sort of panic by Israel as a regime is very similar to, for example, in 1985, when the apartheid government in South Africa, the Pretoria regime, implemented what was called a state of emergency. Basically, I mean, at that point in time, the national liberation movements, the United Democratic, the civil social movements at the time really said, you know what, we must make apartheid unworkable and ungovernable. Effectively, you are saying to people, when you call for a travel ban, and I mean, it's not even possible. Think about it this way. I mean, in terms of trying to ban boycott, divestment and sanctions as a campaign itself, I mean, fine, you want to ban people insofar as movement is concerned. But insofar as the campaign is concerned, it's growing at a supersonic speed. So you can't ban human rights activities in South Africa, in Botswana, in Zambia, in Tanzania, in the different parts of the world. You can't ban the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. It's a mass-based grassroots movement. So what is deeply concerning, I think, that, you know, people that want to do work as well. So Israel's an occupying power is restricting people from accessing entry into Palestine as well, which is deeply concerning.
Gedaliah, go ahead. I can see you had something to respond to there.
Yeah, as a very well-spoken spokesperson, as she is, you know, I think it's important to note that this narrative that we have between apartheid South Africa and Israel is a complete falsity. And I think that what she's doing right now is trying to gain support and, of course, to do a fundraiser, because if you actually got into the actual details of what she was saying, you would realize how completely insignificant what she's saying is, and ideally also, and I'll tell you what, the BDS movement, although she'll tell you that it's growing and it's becoming much more of a global power. The fact is that they're the most irrelevant organization against Israel. I mean, they're putting 5-cent stickers on tomatoes in South Africa and London, while just today, Intel just bought Mobileye for $15 billion. Every month, Israeli tech gets $100 million in foreign investment. And she's saying that this movement.
Let me ask you then, why is Israel calling so much attention to this movement if you think it is basically worthless?
Okay, on an economic level, it's completely worthless, okay? Because again, 5-cent stickers on a tomato is not going to bring down the Israeli government, especially when we're selling companies for $15 billion. On the other hand, and it's very important to make clear, is that the BDS movement's strategy is to destroy Israel. They call the occupation, which started in 1947, which is just, I guess, a coincidence, but that's when the modern state of Israel was reestablished. Okay, now, so, war didn't work against Israel, terror didn't work against Israel, and now they're doing BDS. When they say it's non-violent, that their strategy is violent. Their strategy only started, the BDS movement started in 2005 after the end of the, soon after the second intifada became a complete failure to them. So they moved on to a different, they're using different tactics. So when they say it's a non-violent, they may be non-violent in their protests, but what they're trying to do is violent. They're trying to uproot and destroy the state of Israel as it exists today. And by comparing Israel to apartheid Africa is how they're going to get this sympathy and empathy from people around the world who just don't know the truth. So what they're doing is they're going after people who haven't have a slightest clue that 22% of that Israeli citizens are Arab. We have Arabs, I heard the BDS movement,
Okay, let me just ask Quora on that point. Quora, why do you think the world isn't responding the same to your calls for action via the BDS as it did to those fighting against apartheid South Africa?
I'm not sure what he quite means by the world is not responding the same. But I think insofar as the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is concerned internationally, for example, I think in the last 5 years or so, I think that the boycott itself is growing at a supersonic speed. And this is affirmation by the Israeli government itself. For example, they've established a ministry just to focus on the BDS question. They've also now shifted the responsibility for fighting BDS from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. I think it's something that we've never seen in terms of fighting apartheid policies in South Africa. We've never seen a ministry quite established for fighting the isolation campaigns. And in the last couple of years, we're really seeing a lot of victories coming out internationally. And what's ironically, I think, in terms of I think it's a question we must also pose that in terms of the travel ban, will Israel, I think it's something to observe, will Israel also be willing to also ban young Jewish comrades on the ground that are advancing the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement? For example, you have organizations in South Africa called South African Jews for a Free Palestine that are anti the occupation, that speak very critically of the Israeli government. Are they banning people into Israel-Palestine, certain kinds of people only? Or is it everyone that speaks critically and also supports the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement generally? But I think also insofar as in the last couple of years, some of the major victories that have come out from the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, you've got the Norwegian pension fund, the Swedish pension fund, some among the largest pension funds in the world divesting from Israel. You've got Bill Gates, one of the richest peoples in the world, dumping stock from Group 4 Security Company, which is directly involved in the torture center, the prison systems as well. In the Israeli prison, the torture centers, and detention facilities that house Palestinian political prisoners. In South Africa, for example, you've got an increasing academic boycott campaign. Just 2 years ago, over 200 academics in this country made a pledge that they will not be supporting the Israeli regime or its associated institutions in any form within the academic sphere as well. Okay. You've got 5 university councils as well, adopting full academic and cultural boycotts of Israel as well. You've got mainstream churches such as the Presbyterian Church, the United Church of Christ in the US, with over 1 million members also saying, adopting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So I don't quite understand what he means by, it's not being supported at the rate at which the isolation campaigns is. But also, it's him acknowledging that the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is gaining serious traction.
Okay, unfortunately, Quora, I'm going to have to let you have the last word because we are completely out of time for this debate. But I'd like to thank you both so much, Gedaliah and Quora Kekana, for joining us on the Newsmakers.